Hey everyone, and welcome to another video of Gaming in the Keats. I am your host, Chtay001, and today we are looking at my match 3 in the Berlin Liga B. It's going to be Demon Legions versus, yet again, Orcs and Goblins. First thing I want to point out is the new logo. A friend of mine who's a digital artist was able to work with me on having a logo, and I'm just really excited about it. Thank you so much for the. I will say that I'll put his information in the description below in case anyone wants to reach out for him for commissioned artwork of any kind. And yeah, it was just an absolute blast working with him. You can see the shield, and in the middle of the shield you have the Berlin Fernsehturm, the radio tower, and then the Berlin skyline in the background. So just thank you so much. I absolutely love it. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about the Orcs and Goblins, and this is, keep in mind, this is pre-lab. So this game happened a week before the new lab came out. So we're still working with the old rules. But I also appreciate everyone's patience here because it has been a month since I was able to get in my last battle report. There is a bit of a issue with the league in that, well, not with the league, but someone ended up dropping out of the league, and so that meant there is an odd number of players. So someone else from a different league had to come in and fill in and essentially be the ringer, and so they had to do their game first before I could get in my game. So it just took a lot longer to get this next report out. So I just want to also say thank you to my opponent for stepping in as the ringer. I greatly appreciate it. But now, let's get on to the lists. All right, so diving into my list today, I am changing some things up. I'm going with a Maw of a Khan this time. Simple build, I think, just the Wizard Master and Iron Husk to make the Big Papa the resilient 6 that he needs. We're going with a Wizard Apprentice Scourge again. I'm definitely liking the Dark Hide on this option, especially once you see my opponent's list. And just, we got the parry, we have anti-divine, and just Chitinous Scales to protect against things like Swarm of Insects and Fate's Judgment. Big unit of Succubi with the -2 agility to units in base contact. Big unit of Myrmidons that reroll wounds against large or gigantic. 6 Hoarders. I'm trying out Hoarders for the first time. So they have +1 to wound against scoring units. And we're going with 2 Threshing Engines. We're doing the medium ones this time. So they have the 3d6 impact hits and 1 extra Tiller and, 1 Siren on top. And then 2 Furies for Chaff. So in my opponent's list, they are running an Orc Warlord just on foot with Willow's Ward and the Omen of the Apocalypse and Talisman of Shielding. So nice Resilience 5, 2-up, 5-up save. Just a standard Master of Shamanism. We have a BSB with 2 Aether Icons. We then have a cheeky Goblin Witch Doctor on Thaumaturgy. And then we're going with big unit of Ed Bashers and Spears with Green Tide, so a lot of attacks. We have 30 Goblins with 2 Mad Gits. A small little, I'm assuming this unit is the Bunker, 20 Orcs with the Banner of Discipline. 15 Iron Orcs with Banner of the Relentless Company, so that's going to be an interesting unit to try and shift. I like that unit a lot, just because it's a small, fearless unit that can score objectives pretty well, I think, in this list. We got a unit of Chaff for Goblin Raiders, And then we have 3 times green-eyed catapults, so 3 splatterers and 2 skewers. And then you have 3 giants with giant clubs. So, yeah. So that's a lot of war machines right there, especially for my big monsters and my juicy infantry to deal with. And then you have the giants to just be a nuisance in the list, to score points and get in the way and kill things. So the deployment and scenario are encircle and secure target. And we're on map A3. So I ended up rolling to choose sides, and I chose this side here, and I chose the defender, so I chose the big center. Yeah, my thinking was I'm basically trying to force my opponent to essentially corner in one area, or perhaps I would assume he'd split up the war machines as best as he can to get as many shots in that aren't being blocked on the hill. And if me having the big center, I can react to wherever he decides to deploy and just push forward. So that is my thinking there. Spell selection, we have, I have Ancestral Aid on the Scourge, and then I've gone with Whispers of the Veil, Spectral Blades, Touch of the Reaper, and I went with Dance of Macabre on the Maw. My thinking there is I want to be able to have a movement spell to either go after the objective that doesn't prevent me from scoring in the late game, as well as just trying to push any units that I have on my small flanks. So it just adds that extra bit of pressure as I'm pushing forward on my opponent. My opponent chose the Hereditary, Swarm of Insects, Awaken the Beasts, and Break the Spirit. I think that was rather expected. And then the Witch Doctor ended up taking Cleansing Fire and Smite the Unbeliever. I really like Smite the Unbeliever here because it then makes those war machines more effective against my monsters. And then Cleansing Fire is an interesting pick, which you'll see in the game. He ends up doing some cheeky things with Cleansing Fire. No spoilers. So my thinking before I go into this battle is that I absolutely need to push. With all of those war machines, I just have to get into close combat. That being said, my army definitely outfights him. I do have to be conscious of the giants getting around my flanks and causing issues for my infantry, or also just being a bit careful with them charging some of my big monsters if I've already taken some wounds, because the Maw only has 6 attacks and won't be able to finish off a giant in 1 round. And so that's, depending on how many wounds are on the Maw from the war machines, that could be a problem. The important spells I know I need to be focusing on are Smite the Unbeliever to protect my big monsters from the war machines, Swarm of Insects, of course, to do essentially protect, again, the big monsters from, or the big demons, I should say, from getting wounds taken down on them, and then Break the Spirit, because I want to be charging, 100% want to be charging. I rate this matchup at the moment as a yellow, potentially green. However, that could go south, I think, pretty quickly if his war machines are hitting their mark and I'm not making my Aegis saves. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, deployment. So from my left to right, we have the unit of Myrmidons here. This unit are resembled with swords. Like the models have swords on them. And then we have the Maw of Akan here. We then have a threshing engine, Furies. Then we have the Succubi. They're the unit that's modeled with hammers. Another unit of Furies. We have the Scourge, my new Morathai model. So let's, I do apologize for the gray paint, but she is a new project that I've been working on for oil painting, and I'm curious to see how that ends up turning out. I've never done oil paints before, but that's a topic for another time. Then we have another threshing engine here, and then off to my far right, we have the Hoarders. So for my opponent, he has a giant, splatterer, goblins with the mad gits, and his witch doctor right here in the corner. Another giant, he has a skewer, his big unit of Ed Bashers, skewer. He has the Iron Orcs here without a character. He has his BSB, his shaman, and his general all in the Ed Bashers. Then he has some vanguarded dogs here. He's got another skewer and a splatterer here, a giant facing inward, and this giant is also facing inward as well. And then on the far corner, he has a splatterer and the small unit of orcs, just common orcs. They're 20. So basically, I won this side, and I picked the defender, as I said, and so my opponent just dropped to go first. Yeah, deployment-wise, I thought he did a great job of giving himself options with his war machines with these angles here. I think that was very well done. So I really felt like I was actually rather limited of where I could put my big demons to protect them. So yeah, that was rather challenging to try and figure out. So once he dropped for first, I dropped everything as you see it. The Scourge dark-hearted, so it didn't really matter. And I ended up choosing to drop the Hoarders here. We'll see if that was a mistake. I know that's a lot of points just kind of covering this one side, but as you can see here, my opponent put his secure target on this far board edge here, and I ended up putting my secure target here on the corner of that water feature. I think this was a bit of a mistake on my part because I think I had the room to be able to move it to the other side of the water feature, which forces all of his infantry to come, if he wants to get it, into the water and therefore either take dangerous terrains or just not be steadfast. And so I could have placed that on the opposite corner. I think that would have been a better option because then my Myrmidons could have easily just come up and not have to deal with the water. So I think that would have secured me the target, so to speak, more convincingly in the very beginning. But we'll see how it goes. I know that the Hoarders basically have free reign on this side. There's nothing he can do to deal with the Hoarders unless he wants to bring one of his giants over. But I know I've basically won this target, so now it's really just going to be a fight for the target by the lake. So, Orcs and Goblins, turn 1. He moves up in this nice little concave here, as you can see. He didn't allow my chariot to be able to move out of his giant's line of sight here, so that's well played. And as well, he put his giant on this far left side. I think he actually put me just out of range of the maw to be able to charge. And I think the Myrmidons are probably either out of range or they need a 12. Out here, he's certainly in range of the chariots to be charged with his infantry, but he's not too concerned about the chariots going into his infantry. He's more concerned about the chariots going into, say, the goblins here or the giants. So I know that he put the giants outside of their charge range. Because the chariots are advanced 10, so they can go for some of these charges here, but I don't think I'm going to do that. So, yeah. So that's how my opponent moves on his first turn. So with magic, he puts 2 wounds with Swarm of Insects on the maw. I actually decided to let this one go. It was perhaps a bit questionable. I figured I would rather let that go than him preventing my ability to march, and so I ended up dispelling break the spirit, and then he didn't get anything else off in the magic phase. And the first round of shooting happens, and basically all the war machines missed, and I think if one hit the Scourge, I ended up making my Aegis save. So, woof! Turn 1 shooting done. Whew! Yeah, I got off a bit lucky there. So my turn 2, I move up, as you can see. I'm push the succubi up. This is actually a bit of I think another little micro mistake here is that I didn't put them right on top of the hill. Just to give me more options to be charged. I just didn't like the counter charge options that he had, say, with his giants and his iron orcs. I probably could have chaffed both these units with one of my furies, so it only allowed his giants to come in. But I figured since he had his chaff ready to block me up anyway, I'm just going to make an awkward advance coming forward. And if he can't wheel past my chaff here with the big spears. So really, if he charges them, then he's just overrunning right into all of my counter charges. So that was my thinking there. The maw moves up, the Myrmidons just book it. And I did it so that the giant can't actually charge. I put the maw in the giant's flank, I put the giant in my maw's flank, and I put the Myrmidons in a way where he can't actually connect with the maw on the giant here. Scourge moves, as you can see, trying to block line of sight from, say, these splatterers, but he's still in range of these skewers here, or still in line of sight of the skewers here. So then the chariots go to kind of support and countercharge, and the hoarders again just move their full 10. So that's what I'm thinking here. I'm just trying to set up this nice charge here with the chariot, the chariots, the succubi, and the scourge all at once just coming into the center, because I think he'd then have to expend some resources to try and chaff all those units. So let's see how my opponent reacts to that. And this is just another picture looking a bit closer at my left flank. So magic, I get Whispers of the Veil off on the... I got it on the Ed Bashers because that's where his general was. So they're the minus leadership and minus resilience. And then I got Spectral Blades up, the non-boosted version, on the Succubi. My opponent, I believe, stopped Touch of the Reaper. And so, I was able to get some good spells off there. So, Orcs and Goblins turn 2. He takes no charges. So instead, he decides to put his general in the Iron Orcs, and he does this funky little reform here in which the Iron Orcs can't actually be seen by the succubi, and the chariots and the scourge are all in their front, and so since his general's in there, they're bodyguard. And so that's a cute little trap, I think. That's well played to my opponent there. And then he moves his orc shaman out of the spears and behind them, and then he brings his goblin witch doctor behind his giant, so the giant can't. So the giant's blocking the witch doctor from being targeted by anything at the moment. Say, for example, the Furies wanting to charge. Also, with the way that the Furies are positioned, they cannot see over these units, so they cannot charge the Wolf Riders. They can charge the Skewerer, and at the moment, they can also charge the Skewerer. So this is how my opponent reacts. He just backs everything up here, backs up the giant, and then he puts his giant over here on the left side by my Myrmidons in a way where I can only maximize 3 models. So again, well played to my opponent there, using the side of the board to his advantage. I also made a mistake here. I thought I had covered this angle with the chariot. I did not. I easily could have double-checked it, but he was just able to squeak outside of my chariot's line of sight here, and now is threatening the flank of the succubi and threatening the chariot, and I don't have any counter charges. So, damn it. Nicely done. So that's a nice little picture. You can see the witch doctor just hiding behind his giant there. I ended up dispelling Swarm of Insects this magic phase, and my opponent ends up failing the other spells. So again, I got off a bit lightly there. In shooting, however, a skewer puts 2 wounds onto the Scourge, and then you can also see here he put Cleansing Fire up. Oh, excuse me, yes. So he did get Cleansing Fire up on his BSB in the magic phase as well. And he was able to breath weapon 3 of my Furies off. But I'm really happy about this. Because it gives me several options of what I can do with this unit that I'm really liking. So other than 2 wounds on the Scourge, nothing happens from shooting. So that's turn 2 shooting, where the War Machines do not show up. Woo! So, my turn 2, I declare some charges. I charge my Scourge, and I charge this threshing engine into his BSB's unit, because the BSB is still there. What had happened with my Furies, however, you can see here, I failed the charge. The chariot needed a 7 on Swift Stride, and I didn't roll it. Bummer, but the Scourge is in, so we're just going to be there for quite a while. But what had happened was, now that he had killed the 3 Furies, that allowed the chariot to come into the corner here, and the Scourge would have had to have maximized on this side, making it so he has limited options to attack my chariot, and of course I'm challenging out with the Scourge anyway. So that was a bit of a bummer with the chariot there, but the Scourge is at least in combat, so it can't be shot. And that being said, I chose to not charge the Furies for that exact reason, because if I got that chariot in, I think that would just really help grind down the unit a lot quicker. So instead, I take the Furies. Instead of charging his War Machines, I decide to chaff his giant instead, for getting a counter charge on the Scourge. And so now, at least now that the Scourge is in alone, the Iron Orcs can't see the Scourge, and yeah, can't counter charge. So I'm happy about that. In other news, I moved the Maw up to this side, and I moved the Maw within 12 inches of the Splatterer, so it can't be targeted. And just moving them all to threaten the goblins. I know he has Mad Gits, but I'm hoping to Terra check this goblin unit off at some point soon, once I get rid of that BSB, because I'm not sure he's actually inside 12 inches here. It might be just close. And then Hoarders just move right on up, and for some reason in my mind, I was thinking this was Spoils of War, so I moved the Hoarders just enough to be on top of the objective, like their back corner, but it's not Spoils, it's Secure Target. So I made I had a bit of a brain fart there, and I could have just pushed them right in front of the Orcs next turn, so he had nowhere to go. So that was a mistake on my part. I chaff the giant here and move the chariot out to the side to countercharge the giant. And yeah, push the succubi this time on top of the hill, so I'm giving myself options to charge. Oh, excuse me. And then I reform the Myrmidons into ranks. So my next charge, at least with this giant, is that I'm getting more attacks in. Yes, if he doesn't fail his march check, he can move around and start being a nuisance. I know this, but this is what I got with this unit. So I get Ancestral Aid up on the Scourge, and then I get Whispers of the Veil on the Iron Orcs to minimize that discipline, because that's where his general's at now. So now he has an 8 rerollable instead of a 9 rerollable, and I'm very much happy with that. All right, and after combat, I kill his champion, and his spears stick. Crap. So, that being said, he charges my Furies to get the chaff out of the way. And then that is his only charge. His giant here fails a march check, so he just moves right in front of the maw to block the maw from charging into the goblins. He moves his witch doctor back. And then he again does the same thing with his giant. He just positions it in a way so I can only get 3 models in base contact, but that's still 9 attacks, so I'm at least happy about that. But yeah, so... and then, of course, he just moves this orc unit back for the impending charge from the Hoarders. So in Magic, I actually failed to dispel Swarm of Insects on the Maw. I think I rolled 1 more dice than my opponent, and he just outrolled me. And ironically, I ended up making my Aegis saves on the Maw anyway. However, that also meant my opponent got Smite the Unbeliever off on the Maw for the -1 resilience, and I think the shooting phase is going to hurt unless the War Machines don't show up. But I did dispel Break the Spirit on the succubi, most importantly. So he unleashes his fanatics from the goblins. The first one rolls a 10 and kills my Furies. The second one rolls a 4 and now is in this really ridiculous position where if I charge him, I hit his fanatic. If he charges me, he hits his fanatic. So that's really annoying. But I guess on the plus side, it didn't go through my maw. And boom, the splatterers start hitting. So I lose 7 succubi from 1 splatterer, and then I lose only 4 myrmidons from the other splatterer. So I'm happy about that, at least from the myrmidon side. And then, he puts another, I think, 4 wounds on the maw this time. So the maw now has taken 6 wounds. So it has only 3 wounds left, and that's from some skewers that hit the maw. So, that's not looking good. All right, and in close combat, he gets rid of the Furies, as expected. And I take a wound from his BSB, but I'm also able to kill his BSB. So this makes it an 8 leadership check. No, now it's a 7 leadership check, no reroll. And he makes it. Crap. No. This orc unit, it's sticking around. Yeah, it's a 7 leadership check because he's steadfast. His general is now leadership 8, but because of -1, fear. So, crap. All right, so in my next turn, I charge the Myrmidons into the giant. I need to get rid of it. I decide to charge the chariot here into his goblin unit. And my thinking is he doesn't have a reroll anymore, and he doesn't have leadership in this unit, so I can just break that unit, hopefully, and overrun into his shaman. That's my thought there. I could have gone into the spears, but his fanatic's right there, and I don't feel like taking hits from the fanatic. The succubi do charge the iron orcs. They're not in there right now just because the wings of Marathai kind of block them. So they're inside right there in combat. And then, yeah, I go for the giant. I don't think this is the best matchup for my chariot here, but I'm going to go for it. And then the hoarders also make a long charge. I think they needed a 9 here on Swift Stride into the orcs, and they got it. So we have charges in all over the place, and I chose to not charge the maw. I'm not taking those hits with a Resilience 5 maw with only 3 wounds left from the fanatic. So instead, I move the maw back like so, as you can see. And in Magic, my opponent this time stops Whispers of the Veil, but I am able to get a boosted Spectral Blades up on the Succubi and another Ancestral Aid on the Scourge. So I'm liking those combats. The Myrmidons get rid of the giant, and as expected, the hoarders just bully the orcs, break them, and I do make the overrun into the war machine. It's not quite touching here, but I did get the overrun, so that is good. So that's one less war machine to deal with, and I've secured my right flank. The chariots do here, as you can see, they break the goblin unit, and that, when they ran off the board, caused a panic on the Goblin Witch Doctor. And so then the Goblin Witch Doctor ran off the board. And then that caused a panic on his Skewer. And so now the Skewer can't shoot. So there was a whole cascade of events. And I couldn't have asked for anything more on that one. And here you can see the Scourge goes to town on the orcs, but they are still steadfast, and I take 2 more wounds on the Scourge, so I have 2 wounds left. My opponent is still steadfast and stubborn here with the Iron Orcs. They stick around. The Succubi do end up killing off a few, but he kills a couple back against me, and then I reform into ranks here. I think I could have actually done this better and reformed into 5 to give myself extra combat res just to ensure that I win the combat. Here I do 3 wounds to the giant. The giant does 2 wounds back to me on the chariot, but I'm able to break him. And then the giant gets away. I rolled a 111 on the pursuit. So that was unfortunate. So my opponent's Orcs and Goblins turn 4. This shaman is actually back here against the back of the board. He moved him back already. His giant did rally, and he ends up moving the goblins. I don't actually have the picture of this movement phase, but he ends up moving the goblin raiders away off to this side to where the ruins are. And what did he do with his giant? And then he moved his giant back here to cover any sort of charges I might do with the Myrmidons or the Maw. So the giant is now over in this position looking out this way. So yeah, he's sticking around in the center, but he's starting to lose resources. In Magic, I do stop Swarm of Insects, but he does get Bring the Pain and awaken the beast on the Edbashers here. So my thinking here is that I need the Maw of Akan more than I need the Scourge. So I stop Swarm of Insects. I need to somehow withstand the shooting, and I just hope that maybe my opponent gets unlucky and doesn't sneak the last 2 wounds through, but I think that's unlikely at this point. And the Mad Gits. His Mad Gits go through go through his giant and puts 3 wounds on it. I think this Mad Git missed and almost hit my chariot and almost hit the other Mad Git from the Edbashers actually came this way and almost hit his skewer. So yeah, his Mad Git's going nuts. One of his splatterers actually misfires this turn and can't shoot for a turn, but then nothing happened from shooting, so again, I get off lucky. But as expected, he is able to put the final 2 wounds on the Scourge. And as you can see, I cleared up that splatterer. So now, in my turn, what you're seeing here is that the Maw, I chose to charge the Edbashers with my Maw here in hopes of getting back some wounds, because I need to be in combat, and he ends up panicking, and he runs this way, so these orcs are actually fleeing right now. The Myrmidons failed to charge against the giant. They needed a 7 on Swift Stride, and they fail it again. Or they fail it this time, so darn it. But on other news, the chariot is able to come into the flank of the Iron Orcs. The way that his giant rallied, it meant that I could just wheel past and clip the back end, but I had to also clear my succubi's space as well, so that put the chariot at this angle here for maximizing, so that's really good for me, and hoping to grind down this unit, but we'll see what happens there. Then in Magic, I get Spectral Blades, the small one, off on the chariot, and more importantly, the Maw snipes the Shaman Orc Master. I roll the big D3. I roll the 3 on the big D3, on Touch of the Reaper, and I get him. And that, I think, ends up panicking that War Machine as well. So that is fantastic. Good job, Maw of Akan. My opponent was able to only dispel Whispers of the Veil. So, in close combat, the chariot and the succubi break the Iron Orcs. I think he was down to maybe 4 or 3 models, 3 Iron Orcs left. And what that meant, of course he's still steadfast, but he rolled, I think, a 10 or an 11 on the dice, and he broke anyway, which is a bit lucky on my part. The chariot, I chose to have the Iron Orcs flee from the succubi and have the chariot pursue into his splatterer. The chariot just missed hitting the Edbashers, but was able to connect with the splatterer. And so then I end up reforming the succubi like this to see the Iron Orcs in case they rally next turn. So Orcs and Goblin turn 5. He doesn't rally the Edbashers and they flee off the board. So that's what caused the panic on his skewer. His Goblin Riders just come up here, I guess, to get in the way, or maybe, to save their points. I don't know. Yeah, they're in this area. The giant comes around behind the succubi here, and also to threaten the chariot. And then let's see, excuse me. And then his giant also failed a charge against the Maw of Akan. That was another moment where this is where my opponent called out the war cry, and he had a flank into the Maw, and I think he had actually a good chance of killing it, but he failed the charge. So again, I got off a bit lucky there. And on this turn, what little shooting he has left is a complete bust. So his shooting did not show up today. So on my turn 5, I charge this skewer here. With this chariot, I charge, and I plan to run off the board to save points. I charge this chariot here and try and give myself some counter options. I move the succubi over here to I think they're going to get sandwiched pretty soon by the giants, but I really didn't know what to do with them at that point. I think I was just trying to draw out the giants so that the Myrmidons could maybe get a charge next turn. But yeah, I probably could have done something better with them, to be honest, to try and save their points. But that's what I chose to do. So I'm here on the objective. I'm here on the objective with the Hoarders. Touch of the Reaper in the magic phase puts another 3 wounds on this giant. So this giant here has 1 wound left. And my opponent stops Spectral Blade on the succubi. So my opponent's last turn, he does exactly that. He sandwiches the succubi, and I'm just hoping I can sneak a 6 on the wound roll for this giant, so at least I'm only having 1 giant attack the succubi unit. And no. The succubi didn't roll a 6. Damn it. And so the combined weight of all the attacks and Thunderstomps just crushed them. Oh my goodness. So yeah, I lost my succubi for that one. So my final turn, I'm not sure this is a wise charge either, but they're Myrmidons and I have an Aegis save. So I charge through the lake. I do take a few DTs. I think it took 2 or 3. But I charge this giant here, and then my chariot charges the giant with 1 wound remaining here. And then my Maw of Akan charges his goblins. The goblins actually stick on their leadership. They don't panic. So I charge here as well. I think actually a mistake I again made in the previous term is when I moved my Maw behind the hill, I had forgotten. My plan was in the movement phase to try and use Dance Macabre to move the Maw behind the hill so it wouldn't get shot by the last remaining Splatterer. And I forgot to do that. So, yeah, terrible usage of Dance Macabre, as in no usage of it. So this chariot's off the board. This Fanatic's doing its own thing. The other Fanatic, by the way, just randomly moved off the board. And that's how it's looking. I'm hoping I can get this giant with the final 6. And I'm fairly confident that these Myrmidons can clean up this giant. And yes, as you expected, the chariot gets the final wound on the giant, and the Myrmidons do exactly that. They get the last giant. So the only thing left on my opponent's side in terms of the board is a Splatterer, and that is the end of the game. Whew! And there you have it. It is a 19-1 victory to the Demon Legions. That includes the objective. My opponent was able to get the Scourge, the Succubi, and 2 units of Furies from me for a total of 1855, and I was able to acquire basically everything from my opponent's side except for a single Splatterer. So that gave me a total of 4750. I think on New Recruit it says 4550, but again, I think we just forgot to add in a BSB total or something. So that's a reminder for me to just double check when I'm adding in points. But I also just want to say, great game. A special thanks to my opponent for coming in and essentially being the ringer for this league and acting as the fake account because someone had dropped from our league. So luckily this score doesn't affect my opponent at all. He plays in a different league, but yeah. So it just meant it was just the pressure was on me to do well. No, but it was a really fun game, and I think I got rather lucky that my opponent's war machines just didn't show up today. I certainly made some mistakes here and there that, while didn't end up amounting to anything major or any major losses, I think I still I got off a bit lucky, but I was able to at least push and kind of shake off the rust, if you will. So yeah, afterthoughts on the game. I'm loving the Advanced 10 on the threshing engines. Just the zoning power they have is fantastic. It really stopped my opponent's advance with certain units, and I was just greatly appreciating the range that they have, their threat projection. Also, Whispers of the Veil is just a key spell to have. I'm starting to realize like that -1 discipline, aside from the -1 resilience, is just rather critical for certain armies to stop because they just don't have the discipline strengths in their army list, such as Orcs and Goblins. Of course, keep in mind that this battle came out right before the new lab dropped, so we'll see if anything has changed from there. I think I'm not sure if choosing the defender was the correct option in my deployment, and I really think that I could have deployed my greater demons on the other side, on my right side of that hill, to try and mitigate more of his shooting from his catapults and his skewers. I think I could have done a better job there, and I could even use the Maw Khan to block shots on the Scourge. So I don't think I did a particularly good job at doing that, but at the same time, props to my opponent for utilizing all the different possible angles that he could have with his war machine. So I found it was rather difficult to try and deploy without getting shot by something. So I think talking earlier, the placement of my objective could have been a bit better. It could have been on the other side of the water feature, just to force my opponent further outside of his leadership bubble and to force him into the water terrain more completely so that he wouldn't be steadfast and just presenting more opportunities on my side to charge him. I also never used Dance Macabre. I do think it's a useful spell. Say, for example, at the end, if you're going second and moving a unit onto an objective, or just pushing your army's advance, or being able to do some cheeky movement shenanigans, say, for example, with Wraiths, I think it's a great spell. It's just I just didn't end up using it this game, and so that's just a user error on my part. And then speaking of user errors, just going into general micro mistakes I'm making, I think it's just out of practice. I hadn't played in about a month, and so I could feel the rust for sure. So especially with those micro decisions of not checking the movement of my opponent's single models and how far they could go more accurately, or say, for example, moving the succubi up onto the hill, like instead of eyeballing it. That was just, again, out of practice on my part, and the things to keep note of next time. And I just wanted to share some things I've been working on as well. So hobbying wise, this is my Kaluma Deceiver model that I recently painted up. And I'm also using this model here as my Harbinger. So these are the only two models in the army that don't have wings. And as you can see here, I'm testing out the oil paints on the bases. This process takes a lot longer. I think the way that oil painting has been presented to me is it's a very different mindset instead of using acrylics. So I'm trying to see if I like it or not. And it's different in a way is that you're trying to pull darks or you're pulling lights into certain areas, like darker colors versus lighter colors, because it doesn't dry immediately. And it's an interesting, but it adds a really interesting effect in my opinion. And highlighting is just a bit different here. And so yeah, just wanted to share that with y'all. And thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate the wait as well. I know there's a lot happening in the league. The reason why it was called a fake account is because someone in the league ended up dropping. So someone from a different league ended up coming in and filling in that spot. But that meant that they also had to finish their game first before we could get in our game. So therefore, my game here was delayed in getting this out to everyone. But no, I appreciate y'all just sticking around and watching it, and any support you can throw my way. So that's a like or a subscribe. And as well, in the description below, you'll have the information to my friend in terms of commissioning any sort of art you want. So that's the new logo you see here, Gaming in the Keats, with the Berlin skyline in the background. So thanks again, everyone. And yeah, I'll catch y'all on the next one.